Thank you. Dear friends and dear comrades, care compagne e compagni, care amiche e cari amici, grazie. Grazie di questi giorni appassionanti di lavoro comune. Thank you for these days of common work. For me and for the entire Partito Democratico, it is an honor and a source of pride to have hosted here the Congress of the whole socialist family. Thanks, Stefan. Thanks, Giacomo. Thanks to all of you, our Prime Minister, our delegates, all our leaders. I want to thank all the workers and all the actives of both PES and Partito Democratico because they've organized all of this for all of us. So thank you very much. Grazie a tutte le dipendenti e dipendenti, lavoratori e lavoratrici che hanno insieme agli attivisti animato questi 2 giorni. When we started working at this, we were calling you here to bring us hope. It is crucial for our community to see that we are not alone fighting the extreme right. We have our friends and comrades from all of Europe here. And it is crucial to see that we might live in more than 27 different countries, and we might speak more than 24 different languages, but we fight for the same fights. We believe in the same values, we share the same vision of our future for our Europe. We are a real family. We stick together every day by choice and not because we ought to. Who are we? We are the ones fighting for social justice, against inequalities, fighting for climate justice, for decent jobs, for fair wages, for better housing and living conditions for all, and for supporting the economy against tax havens, fighting for gender equality and human rights. To have you here brings us hope, that's true. But dear comrades, I also hope that we will give some hope back to you after the victory in Sardinia. So thanks a lot. With the first woman that you've seen and the first feminist as president of the region, I want to thank Alessandra Todde and all the parties of the coalition that we put together to win, because we didn't win alone, we win because we fought for unity until the end. Yes, we see a wind of change starting to sweep across the country, and we see clearly that an alternative exists. In 10 days, we'll also vote in Abruzzo, another important region, and I want to send from here all the support to our candidate, Luciano D'Amico. Forza Luciano, senti questo abbraccio di tutta la famiglia socialista europea. Forza, siamo con te. Change is possible, and we're already demonstrating it, and together we will demonstrate it throughout Europe on June the 9th, together with Nicola Schmidt. Nicola, thank you. Thank you for being our candidate. We are proud of this. And we are on the eve of a very crucial campaign and election for the destiny of all our continents, to decide which EU, which European Union we want. What voice Europe should have in a changing world. We are at the heart of global transition that, let's be honest between us, are scaring off our citizens. And we must be the force that drives this change in order to redistribute the benefits, redistribuire I benefici of the two transitions, the digital and the ecological transition. We, as progressive, are the ones willing to protect people through the green and digital transition and represent their hopes instead of blowing on their fears, as the right is doing across all Europe. There is a demand of protection in Europe. We cannot deny that. We have to look at that. There is a demand of protection, but it is mostly a demand of social protection. And that's why we can build together the answer. We must be the worst enemies of the fear of future that we see every day in the eyes of the new generations. Think about the multiple crises that have affected us in the last years. The economic crisis, climate emergency, the pandemic, the return of wars. They demand a more united European Union and have clarified once more that transnational threats can only be managed through stronger common institutions and common European answers. You know me, I am a convinced European federalist because I think that the biggest challenges for our future cannot be solved anymore by any of our countries alone. The national borders are too narrow. So, if you think about fighting inequalities, managing migration, and also ensuring better life conditions to all people, in front of global phenomena, we need European solutions. And Europe is not an accident of history. These were the words of a great pro-European, David Sassoli. We miss him so much. But it's quite obvious that the European Union we know today is not the one that our founding mothers and fathers had in mind. It's not yet it. It's not yet the one shaped in the famous Manifesto di Ventotene, written by young anti-fascists in exile on a small island, deprived of their freedom by the fascist regime. Altiero Spinelli, Ursula Hirschman, Ada Rossi, Ernesto Rossi, Eugenio Colorni. Let's keep those names in mind. Because they decided not to give up to hatred and not to give up to division and not to answer with more hatred, but instead with a dream of a united federal Europe, because they knew that nationalisms in our continent only bring to war, and we see it also today. And they understood that the only way to bring a better future for the new generation is to stick together and to share resources and competences rather than fighting over them. We must do whatever we can to bring on and to complete the project, because the project got stuck into national selfishness. The world needs a stronger EU, and in this EU we are the voice that is not afraid to point out also the shortcomings, the unfinished business, even the mistakes of these recent years. And we must be the voice calling on the European Union to move forward, to improve people's lives and to avoid being crushed into irrelevance. This is the time to fight for the EU we want. We want a social Europe, a Europe for the many and not for the few. A union that delivers for the most vulnerable parts of our society and that is closer to the needs of people in poverty and working poor. We want a Europe for workers, per I lavoratori e le lavoratrici. The one that put 100 billion euros on the social safeguards of the SURE program, saving 42 million jobs in Europe. And I have to thank, really, Nicolas Schmit for the great work he's done in the Commission on Social Issues. You're a social champion, Nicolas. We fought for the directive on the minimum wage, for regulating artificial intelligence, for the child guarantee, and against unpaid internships that exploit young people. Dear Nicolas, we will continue to fight with you for the rights of over 30 million platform for workers, because it was a mistake of the Council to let it down, and I'm sure that you will find together with the support the compromise we need. We want a Europe that leads the world fighting climate emergency. We want a Green Deal with a red heart, as Antonio said this morning. We need to invest in innovation, in research, in competences, to change the unsustainable model of development that in these decades has increased inequalities and is destroying our planet. We need to accompany the whole economy, industries and agriculture to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to invest in renewable energies, into the green economy and sustainable mobility. And to do that, taking by hand workers, businesses, farmers, we need to invest in innovation and skills. There is no planet B, and we do not own this planet, by the way. We have to give it back to the new generation. That's our responsibility. But let me stress that denying climate emergency does not help agriculture, because it is the first victim of climate change, with droughts, floods, extreme events. Here in Italy, Giorgia Meloni said to the farmers, "We've always protected you from the EU's choices." But the farmers are still waiting after 9 months to be refunded after the floods in Emilia-Romagna and after months also in Toscana. This is the truth. While the right denies climate change and abandons people to their destiny, it is us who will take the most vulnerable by the hand and accompany them through this change. But in order to do this, let me be very frank. We need more common investments and a stronger budget. We need it. After the pandemic, thanks to our socialist family, Europe woke up and finally we saw the suspension of the Stability Pact, the SURE program, the Green Deal, the Next Generation EU. A qualitative leap has been made. A change that did not come out of nowhere, but came largely from the commitment of our political family. And here I want to praise our Commissioner, particularly our Paolo Gentiloni, and all the other commissioners of the family for their work in the Commission, but also our S&D group in the European Parliament, because you have made the EU closer to citizens in need in these years. We must ensure that this window of opportunity does not close down, in order to avoid to go back to austerity and divisions. Conservatives and nationalists are already trying to close this window and to cancel these steps forward. You see it in your countries. It's the same thing. It's the same rhetoric. And we need to give continuity to the Next Generation EU. We need more investment to accompany the most fragile, the workers, the businesses, in these transitions. Mario Draghi warned out about the needs of at least 500 billion of common investment every year to support a just digital and green transition. Our former secretary, who is here, by the way, and I thank him, Enrico Letta, is soon to deliver his paper on the social and economic rethinking of the future in the single market. Thanks, Enrico. It will give us good insight and input to go on. We need a European industrial plan to lead the transition, or they will hit in the face the poorest. This is not enough if we don't have a greater budget. Let me say that the budget of the EU is something like 1% of European GDP. It's not enough to meet the challenges that we have ahead of us. And to be honest, we cannot build the Next Generation EU without listening to the next generations. Thanks to the young European socialists for their leadership and their commitment. We want a Europe without tax havens, because we still have 27 different fiscal systems that are competing with each other. And it is estimated, as you know, that we lose something like 700 to 800 billion euros every year to tax evasion and tax avoidance. It's like another Next Generation EU plan. I think that we must stop the race to the bottom in terms of tax incentives between member states, with companies reaching tax rates around 0.0005%. This is not acceptable. This is unfair. And to people following from their home, we have to give a clear and simple message. Taxes should be paid where profits are made, and not where you made an agreement with a government that wants to steal resources to the neighbor. We want a Europe of solidarity. We need to stop the externalization of our borders. We need a shared European mechanism for reception based on solidarity, sharing, and responsibility as well. We have to be clear with people like Viktor Orban. You cannot want only the benefits of belonging to a great union without sharing the responsibilities that come with it. It's very simple. We need to provide safe and legal ways of access to prevent people fleeing from war from ending up in the hands of human traffickers. And we need a European mission of search and rescue in the Mediterranean Sea, because it's a shame that people continue to die. I was in Cutro last week, you remember, 95 deaths. Among them, 34 were children. We cannot accept this. Europe was not created to build walls, but to build new hopes. And we want a feminist Europe. And I want to thank Zita for her leadership and give to Zita Gurmai all our support, because her fights are our fights and we cannot accept the attacks that you're receiving. So we need to fight for women's rights against patriarchy and discrimination, to support women's employment and a fairer distribution of care work in the families. That's the hardest part. We have to fight against gender-based violence, but let me be clear, we should not give up fighting to state that rape is a Eurocrime and that sex without consent is always a crime. We should not and shall not give up this fight. Here we have a government led for the first time by a woman, but it's taking decisions against women every day, cutting their pensions, cutting public health and children's education, making it harder to access abortion. There is a big difference, I always say, between a female leadership and a feminist leadership. It's useless to have a woman in charge if she doesn't fight every day for the rights of all other women in Italy and in Europe. We want a Europe that respects fundamental rights and the rights of LGBTQI people, that respects the rule of law in every country. And let me send our warmth to an Italian citizen detained in unacceptable condition in Hungary, Ilaria Salis. European citizens were shocked in seeing the images of Ilaria Salis brought into chains to court. And we want a Europe for peace. Yes, we want a Europe for peace. We cannot and must not get used to the daily images of pain and destruction. The criminal aggression of Russia against Ukraine has turned back the hands of time, and we have to say as a family, will not accept that borders are redrawn through violence and violating international law. We acted strongly, and we have been united as ever in supporting the resistance of Ukraine. And we will continue to support Ukraine with all necessary means. But Olaf is right. This doesn't mean and doesn't include sending soldiers on the field. And this has to be clear. At the same time, we know that the role of our European Union can stop here and has the historical duty to pull all the strings that can lead to isolate Russia, with a stronger political and diplomatic role of the European Union, and to help also Ukrainians achieving a fair peace at their conditions. We must never shy away from the word peace, comrades, because it's part of our DNA as social democrats and progressives. For the same reason, we want a stronger role of the European Union to start a peace conference in the Middle East. What is happening in Gaza is not acceptable. Hundreds of civilians killed while waiting for humanitarian aid. Adding to the 30,000 victims of these past 5 months, none of us have forgotten the brutal attacks, terrorist attacks of October the 7th, the rapes and execution perpetrated by the terrorists of Hamas, which we immediately condemned. But that brutality does not justify in any way brutality against Palestinian people and civilians. And I agree with Nicolas. Fighting Hamas cannot mean a collective punishment of the whole population of Gaza. Partito Democratico calls for a stronger European initiative for a ceasefire and the release of all hostages and to bring humanitarian aid. We must support Josep Borrell's commitment and his proposal for a peace conference towards the two people and two state solutions, recognizing each other and living in peace and security. But let's be honest, this cannot be done denying Palestinians their right to have a state. Who else should champion peace if not Europe, who was born to preserve peace? And we need to strengthen and deepen our common foreign and security policy, and also build a common defense. But let me be clear, it means putting together competences and political will, have common investments instead of 27 different strategies, not just creating a new commissioner with no real power or portfolio. To do all this, we know that we have to reform the treaties. And I know that we have different sensibilities in this family over this. Let me just tell you what I think. I think that we need, in the medium term, to overcome unanimity and strengthening the European Parliament, because otherwise we will see again what we risked with Orban's veto on the economic support to Ukraine. And I think we cannot afford it in the future. This will be even more necessary in the prospect of the enlargement of Europe that we all support. So, to come to the conclusion, my comrades and friends, two very simple messages. First one, the election result is still to be written. It's not already written. We are here to win the European election in June. And the second message is that the Social Democrats are not to be taken for granted. We are not to be taken for granted. And let's warn the Conservatives. I ask them, are you really willing to betray your history by opening the doors to the extreme right? Where is your limit? I am asking it to the Conservatives and the EPP. Let's stop the normalization of the extreme right. Meloni has opened the door of the ECR to Orban and to Zemmour. So where is the limit for the EPP? It's something that we've already seen here in Italy. It ended with the parties of the EPP family becoming a minor ally of the extremists of ECR and ID. This has led in Italy to the most right-wing government in the history of the Republic, and I assure you, it has behaved exactly as expected from the far right. We wanted to host you here in Italy to see the disasters of the right wing at the government. Since they started, they've cut public health and welfare. They reduced schools in the internal areas. They've cut pension, especially to women. They made it more difficult to save lives at sea, and they are criminalizing young people. They have denied recognition to the children of LGBTQI couples, and they cancelled support to pay the rent and the subsidies against poverty. This is what they really are. But we also wanted to host you here because Meloni and Salvini have brought to Italy the extreme right nationalists, Eurosceptics, friends of Putin, people holding their sign with no money to Italy. This is the people, this is the allies that they have selected. And here we show that we are bringing to Italy the friends of the EU and the friends of the Italian interests. These two things go together. the friends with whom we obtained the Next Generation EU and the Directive on Minimum Wage. That's why we must mobilize here and in other European countries to reaffirm our values, because, let me say, we must not leave internationalism to the nationalists, okay? This is what we ought to do. It is a reactionary right, unable to solve people's concrete problems, and therefore seeking for a new enemy every day. It's the same in all our countries, think about it. Migrants, LGBTQI communities, emancipated women, judges, journalists, climate activists, NGOs. We must highlight their contradiction, because the same rhetoric of hatred and intolerance that they use in a paradox would put them one against the other, on the opposite sides of the wall that they want to build together. We have to show that we have much more in common as a family. We share values and a vision, and we have to bring concrete answers to our people's needs: social justice, good wages, quality jobs, healthcare and mental health care for all, education and affordable houses, clean energy and more participation and democracy. It is up to us, comrades, if Europe will choose fear or hope, closure or progress, the past or the future, and we owe it to the next generation. We owe it to the next generation. Let me just conclude with some words in Italian. Noi insieme ci battiamo per aumentare i salari. Loro sono quelli che bloccano il salario minimo. Noi ci battiamo contro il lavoro precario e loro sono quelli che lo aumentano. Noi ci battiamo per la sanità pubblica mentre loro la smantellano. Noi ci battiamo perché ciascun bambino e bambina abbia diritto ad un'istruzione di qualità, mentre loro riducono le scuole e le autonomie scolastiche nelle aree interne. Noi ci battiamo per la solidarietà europea, mentre loro rendono più difficile salvare le persone dal mare. E noi ci battiamo per i diritti e il diritto ad amare chi ti pare, mentre loro negano l'anagrafe ai figli e alle figlie delle coppie omogenitoriali. Vergogna! Noi ci battiamo per l'eguaglianza delle donne, mentre loro ne tagliano le pensioni, e ci battiamo per il diritto alla casa, mentre loro cancellano il fondo per l'affitto. E noi ci battiamo contro la povertà, mentre loro si battono contro i poveri. So, we owe it to the next generation, to that woman, 27 years old, raising alone her child, who earns 90 euros a month and pays 850 euro to the bank for the interest on her house. We owe it to the young woman who graduated as engineer and sent out, it's a true story, 127 CVs to look for a job, and she was only offered unpaid trainship. And we owe it to that man, Nicolas, that I met in the airport of Turin. He was working there, earning 5.16 euros an hour and doing 3 jobs to be able to get a dinner on the table at night. We owe it to them, our fight, and together we will make it. Thank you.